Thought Vibration by William Walker Atkinson. Chapter 1. Universal Thought Attraction. The universe is governed by law, one great law. Its manifestations are multiform, yet when viewed from the ultimate, there exists but one law. We are conversant with certain of its manifestations, yet remain profoundly ignorant regarding others. Nevertheless, our knowledge expands daily. The veil is gradually being raised. We discourse eruditely upon the law of gravitation, yet neglect that equally marvelous manifestation, the law of attraction in the thought world. We recognize that wondrous manifestation of law which binds the constituent atoms of matter. We acknowledge the power that compels bodies toward the earth and retains circling worlds in their orbits. However, we avert our gaze from the potent law that draws to us the objects of our desires or fears, the law that constructs or dismantles our lives. When we perceive that thought is a force, a manifestation of energy possessing a magnetic power of attraction, we shall commence to comprehend the rationale behind many phenomena that have heretofore appeared obscure. No field of inquiry offers greater recompense for the student's time and effort than the investigation of this potent law within the world of thought. The law of attraction. When we think, we emanate vibrations of a refined, ethereal substance, which are as actual as the vibrations manifesting light, heat, electricity, and magnetism. That these vibrations remain imperceptible to our five senses constitutes no evidence of their non-existence. A powerful magnet emits vibrations and exerts force sufficient to attract a piece of steel weighing 100 pounds. Yet, we can neither see, taste, smell, hear, nor feel this formidable power. Similarly, these thought vibrations cannot be perceived through ordinary sensory channels. Although it is verified that individuals peculiarly sensitive to psychic impressions have perceived powerful thought waves. Furthermore, many among us can testify to having distinctly sensed the thought vibrations of others, both whilst in the presence of the sender and from a distance. Telepathy and its kindred phenomena are not mere idle fantasies. Light and heat are manifested by vibrations of significantly lower intensity than those of thought. However, the distinction lies solely in the rate of vibration. The annals of science cast an illuminating glow upon this subject. Professor Elisha Gray, an eminent scientist, observes in his volume The Miracles of Nature, "There is much food for speculation in the reflection that there exist sound waves which no human ear can distinguish, and color waves of light which no eye can perceive. The vast, dark, soundless void between 40,000 and 400 trillion vibrations per second, and the infinity of range beyond 700 trillion vibrations per second, where light ceases in the universe of motion, renders it possible to indulge in speculation." M. Williams, in his work entitled Short Chapters in Science, states, "There is no gradation between the most rapid undulations or tremors producing our sensation of sound, and the slowest of those giving rise to our sensations of gentlest warmth. There exists an immense chasm between them, sufficiently wide to encompass another world of motion, situated entirely between our realm of sound and our realm of heat and light. And there is no valid reason to suppose that matter is incapable of such intermediate activity, or that such activity may not engender intermediate sensations, provided there exist organs for receiving and rendering perceptible their movements. I cite the aforementioned authorities merely to provide intellectual stimulation, rather than to attempt a demonstration of the fact that thought vibrations exist. This latter fact has been fully established to the satisfaction of numerous investigators of the subject, and a brief reflection will reveal that it coincides with your own experiences. We frequently hear the well-known mental science aphorism, "Thoughts are things," yet we recite these words without consciously realizing the precise import of the statement. Were we to fully comprehend the veracity of this statement and the natural consequences intrinsic to it, we should understand many matters that have appeared obscure to us, and we would be enabled to utilize that wondrous power, thought force, just as we employ any other manifestation of energy. As I have previously articulated, when we think, we set in motion vibrations of a very high degree, yet they are as substantial as the vibrations of light, heat, sound, and electricity. When we understand the laws governing the production and transmission of these vibrations, we shall be capable of employing them in our daily existence, much as we do the more familiar forms of energy. That we can neither see, hear, weigh, nor measure these vibrations constitutes no proof of their non-existence. There exist waves of sound which no human ear can distinguish, although some are undoubtedly registered by the auditory organs of certain insects, and others are captured by delicate scientific instruments devised by man. Yet, a significant chasm exists between the sounds registered by the most sensitive instrument and the limit which the human mind, reasoning by analogy, identifies as the boundary between sound waves and other forms of vibration. Furthermore, there are light waves which the human eye does not register. Some may be detected by sensitive instruments, while many others are so subtle that no apparatus has yet been invented to discern them. Nevertheless, advancements are made annually, and the unexplored field is gradually diminished. As new instruments are devised, new vibrations are registered by them. Yet, these vibrations were just as real prior to the invention of the instrument as they were subsequently. Supposing we possessed no instruments to register magnetism, one might feel justified in denying the existence of that potent force, simply because it could not be tasted, felt, smelled, heard, seen, weighed, or measured. And yet, the powerful magnet would still emit waves of force sufficient to attract pieces of steel weighing hundreds of pounds. Each form of vibration necessitates its own specific instrument for registration. At present, the human brain appears to be the sole instrument capable of registering thought waves, although occultists assert that within this century, scientists will invent apparatus sufficiently delicate to capture and register such impressions. Judging by present indications, it appears that the aforementioned invention may be expected at any moment. The demand exists and will undoubtedly be supplied forthwith. However, to those who have experimented along the lines of practical telepathy, no further proof is required beyond the results of their own investigations. We are constantly emitting thoughts of greater or lesser intensity, and we are reaping the consequences of such mental emanations. Not only do our thought waves influence ourselves and others, but they also possess a magnetic quality. They attract to us the thoughts of others, objects, circumstances, people, and fortune, in accordance with the character of the thought paramount in our minds. Thoughts of love will attract to us the love of others, alongside circumstances and environments in harmony with that sentiment, and individuals who harbor similar ideations. Conversely, thoughts of anger, hate, envy, malice, and jealousy will draw to us the foul brood of kindred thoughts emanating from the minds of others. They will attract circumstances in which we are compelled to manifest these vile sentiments and receive them in turn, as well as individuals who manifest inharmony, and so forth. A potent thought, or one sustained over a prolonged period, will render us the center of attraction for the corresponding thought waves of others. Like attracts like in the thought world. As ye sow, so shall ye reap. Birds of a feather flock together in the thought world. Curses, like chickens, come home to roost, bringing their companions with them. The individual who is replete with love perceives love on all sides and attracts the love of others. The man harboring hate in his heart incurs all the hate he can endure. The individual who contemplates conflict invariably encounters a plenitude of hostility sufficient to satisfy his cravings before his endeavors are concluded. Thus the pattern persists. Each entity summons precisely what he solicits across the wireless telegraphy of the mind. The gentleman who awakens in a state of irascibility typically succeeds in immersing his entire household in that identical disposition prior to the conclusion of the morning repast. The contentious woman generally discovers ample cause to satiate her propensity for fault-finding throughout the duration of the day. This phenomenon of thought attraction constitutes a subject of profound gravity. Upon pause for contemplation, one shall discern that a man essentially architects his own environment, notwithstanding his inclination to cast aspersion upon others for his circumstances. I have been acquainted with individuals who, having comprehended this statute, maintained a positive and tranquil mental state, remaining entirely impervious to the discord enveloping them. They resembled the vessel from which oil had been dispensed upon turbulent waters. They reposed in safety and serenity whilst the tempest raged about them. One ceases to be at the mercy of the capricious storms of thought once he has mastered the operations of the law. We have traversed the era of physical force, advanced to the epoch of intellectual supremacy, and are presently crossing the threshold into a novel and virtually unexplored domain, that of psychic power. This domain possesses its established statutes, and it behooves us to familiarize ourselves with them. Otherwise, we shall be driven to the wall, much like the unilluminated upon the plains of endeavor. I shall endeavor to elucidate the profound fundamental principles of this nascent field of energy now unfolding before us, that you may be empowered to utilize this immense potency and apply it toward legitimate and meritorious ends, precisely as mankind currently employs steam, electricity, and other modalities of energy. Chapter 2. Thought Wave Reproduction. Akin to a stone cast into the water, a thought generates ripples and undulations that propagate across the great ocean of thought. A distinct difference exists, however. While aquatic waves traverse only a horizontal plane in every direction, thought waves radiate spherically from a central point of origin, precisely as do the rays from the sun. Just as we on this terrestrial sphere are encompassed by a vast sea of atmosphere, so too are we enveloped by a boundless sea of mind. Our mental undulations traverse this immense mental ether, extending in all directions as I have previously elucidated. However, they diminish slightly in intensity relative to the distance covered, owing to the friction engendered by the wave's interaction with the pervasive body of mind surrounding us on all sides. These cerebral waves possess additional attributes that distinguish them from aquatic ripples. They hold the capacity for self-reproduction. In this regard, they bear a greater resemblance to acoustic waves than to those upon the water. Precisely as a note struck upon a violin compels a delicate goblet to vibrate and resonate, so too does a potent thought tend to arouse analogous vibrations within minds attuned to its reception. A significant number of the errant thoughts that visit us are merely reflections or sympathetic vibrations responding to a powerful concept projected by another individual. Yet, unless our mental faculties are attuned to accommodate such a signal, the thought is unlikely to influence us. Should we entertain elevated and magnificent thoughts, our minds acquire a specific keynote commensurate with the nature of the cogitations we have harbored. Furthermore, once this keynote is established, we become predisposed to intercept the vibrations of other intellects tuned to that identical frequency. Conversely, were we to adopt the habit of entertaining thoughts of a contrary nature, we would shortly find ourselves echoing the inferior order of ideation emanating from the minds of thousands who contemplate similar themes. We are, to a great extent, the product of what we have thought ourselves into being, the balance being represented by the character of suggestions and thoughts from others, which have reached us either directly through verbal intimation or telepathically via these mental waves. Our prevailing mental attitude, however, determines the character of the thought waves received from external sources, as well as the thoughts radiating from our own consciousness. We accept only those thoughts that exist in harmony with the general mental attitude held by ourselves. Thoughts lacking such resonance impact us strictly minimally, for they elicit no response within us. The individual who believes implicitly in himself and sustains a robust, positive mental attitude of confidence and determination is unlikely to be swayed by the adverse and negative thoughts of discouragement and failure emanating from the minds of persons in whom these latter qualities predominate. Simultaneously, should these negative thoughts reach one whose mental attitude is pitched on a low key, they exacerbate his negative state and add fuel to the fire consuming his vitality. Or, if one prefers the alternative metaphor, serve to further extinguish the flame of his energy and industry. We attract to ourselves the thoughts of others that belong to the same intellectual order. The man who contemplates success is liable to harmonize with the minds of others thinking in a similar vein. Consequently, they shall assist him, and he them. The individual who permits his mind to dwell perpetually upon thoughts of failure brings himself into close proximity with the minds of other unsuccessful persons, and each will tend to drag the other down further still. He who believes that all is evil is prone to perceive much wickedness, and shall be drawn into contact with others who appear to substantiate his hypothesis. Conversely, the man who seeks the good in all things and all people will likely attract to himself the circumstances and individuals corresponding to his mindset. In general, we perceive that for which we search. You will be able to grasp this concept with greater clarity if you consider the Marconi wireless instruments. These receive vibrations solely from a transmitting apparatus attuned to the identical frequency, while other telegrams traverse the immediate atmosphere without impacting the receiver. The same law governs the operations of thought. We receive only that which corresponds to our mental attunement. If we have become discouraged, we may rest assured that we have descended into a negative key. Thus, we are affected not merely by our own cogitations but have also received the supplementary depressing thoughts of a similar character constantly emitted by the minds of other unfortunates who have not yet comprehended the law of attraction within the realm of thought. Furthermore, should we occasionally ascend to heights of enthusiasm and vitality, how rapidly we perceive the influx of courageous, daring, energetic, and positive thoughts being projected by the vibrant men and women of the world. We recognize this phenomenon with little difficulty when we come into personal contact with individuals and sense their vibrations, whether depressing or invigorating, as the circumstances may dictate. Yet the same law operates even when we are absent from their presence, albeit with diminished intensity. The mind possesses manifold degrees of pitch, ranging from the highest positive note to the lowest negative note, with numerous gradations intervening, varying in pitch according to their respective proximity to the positive or negative extreme. When your mind operates along positive lines, you feel robust, buoyant, luminous, cheerful, contented, confident, and courageous. Consequently, you are empowered to perform your labors excellently, to execute your intentions, and to advance upon your path to success. You emit strong, positive thought, which influences others and compels them to cooperate with you or to follow your lead, in accordance with their own mental keynote. When you play upon the extreme negative end of the mental keyboard, you feel depressed, weak, passive, dull, fearful, and cowardly. Moreover, you find yourself incapable of making progress or achieving success. Furthermore, your influence upon others is practically nil. You are led by, rather than leading, others, and you are utilized as a human doormat or football by more positive individuals. In certain individuals, the positive element appears to predominate, while in others, the negative quality seems more evident. There exist, naturally, widely varying degrees of positiveness and negativeness. Thus, B may be negative relative to A, while remaining positive in relation to C. When two individuals first encounter one another, a silent mental conflict generally ensues, wherein their respective minds assess their quality of positiveness and establish their relative positions toward each other. This process may occur unconsciously in many instances, yet it transpires nonetheless. The adjustment is frequently automatic. However, occasionally the struggle is so acute, the opponents being so evenly matched, that the matter forces itself into the conscious awareness of both parties. Sometimes both parties are so similar in their degrees of positiveness that they fail to come to terms mentally. They are never truly able to harmonize with one another, and they are either mutually repelled and separate, or else remain together amidst constant broils and wrangling. We stand in a positive or negative relation to everyone with whom we interact. We may be positive toward our children, our employees, and our dependents, yet simultaneously negative toward others to whom we occupy inferior positions, or whom we have permitted to assert themselves over us. Naturally, an event may transpire whereby we suddenly become more positive than the man or woman to whom we have heretofore been negative. We frequently observe instances of this nature. Furthermore, as the knowledge of these mental laws becomes more universal, we shall witness many more instances of persons asserting themselves and utilizing their newfound power. Yet, remember that you possess the power to elevate the keynote of your mind to a positive pitch through an exertion of the will. And, naturally, it is equally true that you may allow yourself to descend into a low, negative note through negligence or a feeble will. It is an observable reality that a greater number of individuals reside upon the negative plane of thought than upon the positive. Consequently, a preponderance of negative thought vibrations circulates within our mental atmosphere. Yet, fortuitously, this disparity is equilibrated by the truth that a positive thought possesses infinitely superior potency compared to a negative one. Furthermore, should we, through sheer volition, elevate ourselves to a superior mental pitch, we may effectively exclude despondent cogitations and intercept the vibrations that correspond to our transformed mental attitude. This constitutes one of the fundamental principles regarding the affirmations and autosuggestions employed by the various academies of mental science and other new thought movements. While affirmations possess no intrinsic merit in isolation, they serve a significant dual purpose. Primarily, they facilitate the establishment of novel mental dispositions within our psyche and operate with remarkable efficacy in the realm of character architecture, the science of self-reconstruction. Secondarily, they serve to elevate the mental keynote, thereby enabling us to derive benefit from the positive thought waves emanating from others occupying that identical plane of thought. Irrespective of our conscious credence in their efficacy, we are perpetually formulating affirmations. The individual who asserts that he can and will execute an endeavor, and does so with earnest conviction, cultivates within himself those qualities conducive to the successful consummation of said task. Simultaneously, he tunes his mind to the appropriate frequency to receive all thought waves calculated to assist him in that execution. Conversely, should one articulate and internalize a sense of impending failure, he will stifle and suppress those impulses arising from his own subconscious mentality intended for his aid. Concurrently, he aligns himself with the failure thought of the world, and of this latter category, I assure you, there exists a prevalent abundance. Do not permit yourselves to be influenced by the adverse and negative ruminations of those in your vicinity. Ascend to the superior strata of your mental edifice, and calibrate yourself to a pitch of high intensity, far transcending the vibrations native to the lower planes of thought. In so doing, you shall become not only impervious to their negative vibrations but also find yourself in communion with the vast reservoir of potent positive thought emanating from those who share your own plane of development. My objective is to instruct and discipline you in the proper employment of thought and volition, such that you may maintain complete self-governance and possess the capacity to strike the positive key at any juncture you deem necessary. It is not requisite, however, to sustain the note of maximal intensity upon all occasions. The preferable strategy is to maintain oneself in a comfortable registry, devoid of excessive exertion, while retaining the command of resources whereby one may elevate the pitch instantaneously should the occasion demand it. Through this understanding, you shall not remain at the mercy of the mind's antiquated, involuntary mechanisms, but rather hold them firmly under your own dominion. The development of the will is intimately analogous to the development of a muscle, a matter of disciplined practice and gradual amelioration. Initially, it is liable to prove wearisome, yet with each subsequent trial, one acquires greater vigor until this newfound strength becomes substantial and enduring. Many among us have rendered ourselves positive when confronted by sudden exigencies or emergencies. We are accustomed to fortifying our resolve when the occasion requires it. Yet, through judicious practice, you shall become so invigorated that your habitual state will equal your current fortified condition. Subsequently, when you find it necessary to apply the spur, you shall be capable of reaching a stage hitherto unimagined. Do not misconstrue my intent as advocating a state of high tension in perpetuity. Such a condition is wholly undesirable, not only because it is apt to prove excessively taxing, but also because you will find it advantageous to alleviate the tension periodically, thereby becoming receptive so that you may assimilate impressions. It is prudent to possess the capacity to relax and assume a certain degree of receptivity, secure in the knowledge that you are always capable of returning to the more positive state at will. The individual who remains habitually and rigidly positive forfeits considerable enjoyment and recreation. In the positive state, one projects expressions. In the receptive state, one absorbs impressions. While positive, you act as the pedagogue, while receptive, the pupil. It is not only a commendable attribute to be an accomplished teacher, but it is also of vital importance to serve, at times, as an attentive auditor. Chapter 3. Active and Passive Mentation. Man possesses a singular mind, yet he is endowed with a multitude of mental faculties, each capable of operating along two distinct trajectories of cerebral exertion. There exist no rigid demarcations separating the respective functions of a faculty. Rather, they graduate into one another akin to the hues of the spectrum. An active effort of any mental faculty is the consequence of a direct impulse imparted at the precise moment of exertion. Conversely, A passive effort of any faculty stems from a preceding active effort of the same intellect, an active effort of another via suggestion, thought vibrations from an external mind, or thought impulses from an ancestor transmitted through the laws of heredity. This includes impulses conveyed from generation to generation since the original vibratory impetus imparted by the primal cause, impulses that gradually unfold and unsheath upon attaining the appropriate stage of evolutionary development. The active effort is nascent, freshly minted, whereas the passive effort is of less recent origin and, indeed, frequently results from vibratory impulses imparted in ages long past. The active effort forges its own course, brushing aside impeding vines and casting obstructing stones from its path. The passive effort traverses the trodden path. A thought impulse or motion impulse, originally engendered by an active effort of a faculty, may, through continued repetition or habit, become strictly automatic. The impetus provided by the reiterated active effort develops a potent momentum that propels it along passive lines until it is arrested by another active effort or its direction is altered by that same agency. On the other hand, thought impulses or motion impulses perpetuated along passive lines may be terminated or rectified by an active effort. The active function creates, alters, or obliterates. The passive function executes the task assigned by the active function, adhering to commands and suggestions. The active function generates the thought habit or motion habit and imparts to it the vibrations that subsequently sustain its momentum along passive lines. The active function also possesses the capacity to emit vibrations that neutralize the momentum of the thought habit or motion habit. Furthermore, it is capable of launching a new thought habit or motion habit with more potent vibrations, which surmounts and absorbs the initial thought or motion, substituting the new in its stead. All thought impulses or motion impulses, once dispatched upon their errands, continue to vibrate along passive trajectories until rectified or terminated by subsequent impulses imparted by the active function or another controlling power. The persistence of the original impulse augments its momentum and force, thereby rendering its correction or termination more arduous. This elucidates the phenomenon known as the force of habit. I posit that this concept will be readily comprehended by those who have struggled to surmount a habit that was easily acquired. The law applies to virtuous habits as fully as to the deleterious. The moral implication is manifest. Several mental faculties frequently combine to produce a singular manifestation. A task to be executed may demand the combined exercise of various faculties, some of which may manifest via active effort and others via passive effort. The confrontation of novel conditions or unprecedented problems demands the exercise of active effort, whereas a familiar problem or task is easily managed by the passive effort without the assistance of its more enterprising counterpart. There exists in nature an instinctive propensity within living organisms to perform specific actions, a tendency of an organized entity to seek that which satisfies the requirements of its constitution. This tendency is occasionally termed appetency. It is, in truth, a passive mental impulse, originating with the impetus imparted by the primal cause and transmitted along the lines of evolutionary development, acquiring strength and potency as it progresses. The impulse of the primal cause is aided by the powerful upward attraction exerted by the Absolute. In plant life, this tendency is plainly discernible, ranging from minor exhibitions in the lower types to greater manifestations in the higher. This is that which is generally designated as the life force in vegetation. It is, however, a manifestation of rudimentary mentation, functioning along the lines of passive effort. In certain higher forms of botanical life, there appears a faint shade of independent vital action, a subtle indication of volitional choice. Authorities on plant life recount many remarkable instances of this phenomenon. It is undoubtedly an exhibition of rudimentary active mentation. In the lower animal kingdom, a very high degree of passive mental effort is ascertained, and, varying in degree among the several families and species, a considerable amount of active mentation is apparent. The lower animal undoubtedly possesses reason, merely to a lesser degree than man. Indeed, the display of volitional mentation exhibited by an intelligent beast is often nearly as elevated as that demonstrated by the lower types of humanity or by a young child. Just as a child, prior to birth, exhibits within its physical form the stages of man's physical evolution, so does a child, before and after birth until maturity, manifest the stages of man's mental evolution. Man, the highest type of life yet produced, at least upon this planet, exhibits the supreme form of passive mentation, as well as a much higher development of active mentation than is observed in the lower animals. Nevertheless, the degrees of that power vary widely among the different races of mankind. Even among men of our own race, the varying degrees of active mentation are plainly noticeable, these gradations depending by no means upon the extent of culture, social position, or educational advantages possessed by the individual. Mental culture and mental development are two fundamentally distinct entities. One need only look about to witness the differing stages of the development of active mentation in man. The reasoning of many men is scarcely more than passive mentation, exhibiting few qualities of volitional thought. They prefer to permit others to think on their behalf. Active mentation fatigues them, and they find the instinctive, automatic, passive mental process far less taxing. Their minds operate along the lines of least resistance. They are but little more than human sheep. Among the lower animals and the inferior types of men, active mentation is largely confined to the grosser faculties, the more material plane, while the higher mental faculties function along the instinctive, automatic lines of the passive mode. As the lower forms of life progressed in the evolutionary scale, they developed new faculties that had been latent within them. These faculties invariably manifested in the form of rudimentary passive functioning, and subsequently ascended through higher passive forms until the active functions were brought into play. The evolutionary process persists, the invariable tendency being toward the goal of highly developed active mentation. This evolutionary progress is caused by the vibratory impulse imparted by the primal cause, aided by the uplifting attraction of the Absolute. This law of evolution remains in operation, and man is beginning to develop new mental powers, which naturally are first manifesting themselves along the lines of passive effort. Certain men have developed these new faculties to a considerable degree, and it is plausible that ere long man shall be capable of exercising them along the line of their active functions. Indeed, this power has already been attained by a few. This constitutes the secret of the Oriental occultists, and of certain of their Occidental brethren. The amenability of the mind to the will can be augmented by properly directed practice. That which we are accustomed to referencing as the strengthening of the will is, in reality, the training of the mind to recognize and absorb the power within. The will possesses intrinsic potency and requires no fortification. Rather, the mind demands cultivation to receive and execute the mandates of the will. The will constitutes the externalized manifestation of the I Am. The current of the will streams with undiminished vigor along spiritual conduits. Yet one must acquire the aptitude to elevate the trolley pole to contact it before the mental carriage may commence motion. This concept diverges somewhat from the theories one is accustomed to receiving from authors regarding willpower. Nevertheless, it is accurate, a verity you shall demonstrate to your own satisfaction, provided you pursue the subject through experimentation along appropriate trajectories. The magnetism of the Absolute draws mankind upward, and the vibratory magnitude of the primal impulse has not yet depleted itself. The epoch of evolutionary progression has arrived wherein man possesses the capacity to assist himself. The individual who comprehends the law may achieve marvels through the cultivation of mental faculties, whereas he who turns away from the truth shall languish due to his deficiency in understanding the law. He who grasps the statutes of his mental existence cultivates his latent powers and employs them with sagacity. He does not disdain his passive mental functions. On the contrary, he utilizes them advantageously, entrusting them with the obligations for which they are optimally suited. Consequently, he elicits extraordinary results from their labor, having mastered and disciplined them to execute the bidding of the higher self. Should they fail to perform their functions adequately, he regulates them. Furthermore, his erudition precludes him from interfering with them unintelligently, thereby shielding himself from injury. He cultivates the faculties and potencies dormant within him, acquiring the method to manifest them along the trajectory of active mentation as well as passive. He recognizes that the true man within is the master, to whom both active and passive functions serve merely as instruments. He has exiled fear and revels in freedom. He has discovered himself. He has acquired the secret of the I Am. Chapter 4. Real Self-Architecture. Humanity possesses the capacity to construct the intellect and mold it according to volition. Indeed, we are engaged in the architecture of the mind during every hour of our existence, whether consciously or unconsciously. The preponderance of individuals perform this labor unconsciously. However, those who have perceived somewhat beneath the superficies of existence have assumed control of the matter and have become conscious creators of their own mentality. They are no longer susceptible to the suggestions and influences of others, but have evolved into masters of themselves. They assert the ego and compel obedience from the subordinate mental faculties. The ego functions as the sovereign of the mind, and that which we designate as will serves as the instrument of the ego. Naturally, there exists something posterior to this, and the universal will is superior to the will of the individual. Nevertheless, the latter maintains a far more intimate connection with the universal will than is generally surmised. And when one conquers the lower self and asserts the ego, one establishes close contact with the universal will and partakes substantially of its miraculous power. The moment one asserts the ego and discovers oneself, one establishes a potent connection between the individual will and the universal will. However, prior to utilizing the mighty power at his command, he must first effect the mastery of the lower self. Contemplate the absurdity of man purporting to manifest powers while remaining the thrall of the baser components of his mental constitution, which ought to be subordinate. Contemplate a man remaining the slave of his temperaments, passions, animal appetites, and lower faculties, while simultaneously attempting to claim the benefits of the will. At this juncture, I am not advocating asceticism, which appears to me an admission of infirmity. I speak of self-mastery, the assertion of the ego over the subordinate aspects of oneself. In the elevated perspective of the subject, this ego is the only genuine self, and the remainder is the non-self. However, our spatial constraints preclude the discussion of this point, and we shall employ the term self as signifying the entire individual. Prerequisite to the full assertion of the ego in its utmost strength, one must obtain complete mastery of the subordinate parts of the self. All entities possess merit when we learn to master them, yet nothing is meritorious when it masters us. So long as we permit the lower portions of the self to issue orders, we remain bondsmen. It is only when the ego ascends his throne and elevates the scepter that order is established and elements assume their proper relation to one another. We find no fault with those who are swayed by their lower selves. They reside in a lower grade of evolution and will ascend in due time. However, we are directing the attention of those who are prepared to the fact that the sovereign must assert his will, and that the subjects must obey. Commands must be issued and executed. Insurrection must be quelled, and rightful authority insisted upon. Furthermore, the time to execute this is now. You have permitted your rebellious subjects to restrain the king from his throne. You have allowed the mental kingdom to be misgoverned by irresponsible faculties. You have been the thralls of appetite, unworthy thoughts, passion, and negativeness. The will has been set aside, and low desire has usurped the throne. It is time to re-establish order within the mental kingdom. You are competent to assert mastery over any emotion, appetite, passion, or class of thoughts by the assertion of the will. You can command fear to retreat to the rear, jealousy to vacate your presence, hate to depart from your vision, and anger to conceal itself. You can order worry to cease troubling you, and uncontrolled appetite and passion to bow in submission and become humble servants rather than masters, all by the assertion of the ego. You may encircle yourself with the resplendent coterie of courage, love, and self-control by the same means. You may quell the rebellion and secure peace and order in your mental kingdom if you will but articulate the mandate and insist upon its execution. Prior to advancing toward empire, you must establish the proper internal condition and must demonstrate your ability to govern your own kingdom. The initial battle is the conquest of the lesser self by the real self. Affirmation: I am asserting the mastery of my real self. Reiterate these words with fervor and positivity during the day at least once per hour, and particularly when you are confronted with conditions that tempt you to act in accordance with the baser nature rather than following the course dictated by the real self. In the intervals of doubt and hesitation, articulate these words earnestly, and your trajectory will be illuminated for you. Recite them several times subsequent to retiring and settling yourself to sleep. However, ensure you reinforce the words with the thought inspiring them, and do not merely repeat them by rote. Construct the mental visualization of the real self asserting its mastery over the lower planes of your mind. Visualize the king upon his throne. You will become conscious of an influx of new thought, and tasks which have seemed arduous for you will suddenly become much more facile. You will perceive that you have yourself well in hand, and that you are the architect and not the servant. The thought you are maintaining will manifest itself in action, and you will steadily grow to become that which you have in mind. Exercise. Fasten the intellect firmly on the higher self and draw inspiration from it when you feel compelled to yield to the promptings of the lower part of your nature. When you are provoked to erupt into anger, assert the ego, and your vocal cadence will descend. Wrath is beneath the dignity of the developed self. When you feel vexed and perturbed, recall what you are and ascend above your feeling. When you feel fearful, Recall that the real self fears nothing, and assert courage. When you feel jealousy inciting, contemplate your higher nature and laugh. Proceed in this manner, asserting the real self and prohibiting the elements on the lower plane of mentality from disturbing you. They are unworthy of you and must be taught to maintain their stations. Do not permit these elements to master you. They should be your subjects, not your masters. You must transcend this plane, and the sole method to achieve this is to sever ties with these phases of thought which have been administering affairs to suit themselves. You may encounter difficulty at the onset, but persist, and you will possess that satisfaction which derives only from conquering the lower parts of our nature. You have been a bondservant for sufficient duration. Now is the time to emancipate yourselves. If you will adhere to these exercises faithfully, you will be a transformed entity by the conclusion of the year, and will look back with a sympathetic smile to your status quo ante. However, it requires labor. This is not a trivial pastime, but an undertaking for sincere men and women. Will you make the effort? Chapter 5. Mental Will Development. While psychologists may diverge in their theories regarding the nature of the will, none refute its existence, nor dispute its potency. Every individual acknowledges the efficacy of a formidable will. All perceive how it may be utilized to surmount the most imposing obstacles. Yet, few comprehend that the will is capable of development and fortification through intelligent practice. They perceive that they might achieve marvels were they possessed of a robust will. However, rather than endeavoring to cultivate it, they resign themselves to futile lamentations. They sigh, yet they execute nothing. Those who have scrutinized the subject meticulously understand that willpower, replete with all its latent possibilities and potent capacities, may be cultivated, disciplined, regulated, and directed, precisely as any other natural force. It is of no consequence which theory one entertains regarding the essential nature of the will. One shall secure results provided one practices with intelligence. Personally, I harbor a somewhat unconventional hypothesis concerning the will. I posit that every man possesses, potentially, a formidable will, and that his sole obligation is to discipline his mind to utilize it. I surmise that within the elevated regions of every man's intellect lies a vast reservoir of willpower awaiting his command. The will current courses along psychic conduits, and all that is requisite is to elevate the mental trolley pole and draw down the power for one's utilization. Furthermore, the supply is infinite, for one's diminutive storage battery is connected to the grand powerhouse of universal willpower, and this energy is inexhaustible. Your will requires no training. Rather, your mind demands it. The mind serves as the instrument, and the provision of willpower is proportionate to the refinement of the vessel through which it manifests. However, you are under no obligation to accept this hypothesis should it prove disagreeable. This lesson shall accommodate your theory as seamlessly as my own. He who has cultivated his mind such that it permits willpower to manifest through it has unlocked marvelous possibilities for himself. Not only has he discovered a formidable power at his behest, but he is also capable of deploying and utilizing faculties, talents, and abilities of whose existence he had never dreamed. This secret of the will constitutes the magic key that unseals all portals. The late Donald G. Mitchell once wrote, "Resolve is what makes a man manifest. Not feeble resolve, but raw determination. Not errant purpose, but that robust and indefatigable will which treads down difficulties and danger, as a boy treads down the heaving frostlands of winter. which kindles his eye and brain with a proud pulse beat toward the unattainable. Will transforms men into giants. Many among us perceive that if we would but exert our will, we might achieve marvels. Yet, somehow, we do not appear inclined to undertake the exertion. At any rate, we do not arrive at the actual point of willing. We procrastinate from time to time, speaking vaguely of some future date, yet that day never arrives. We instinctively sense the potency of the will, but we lack sufficient energy to exercise it. Thus, we drift with the tide, unless perhaps some benevolent difficulty arises, some helpful obstacle appears in our path, or some kindly pain stirs us into action, in which instances we are compelled to assert our will and thereby commence to achieve something. The difficulty with us is that we do not desire the objective sufficiently to compel us to exert our willpower. We do not desire with sufficient intensity. We are mentally lethargic and possessed of feeble desire. If you dislike the word desire, substitute for it the word aspiration. Some designate the lower impulses as desires and the higher as aspirations. It is entirely a matter of nomenclature. Make your selection. That is the essential difficulty. Let a man be in peril of losing his life. Let a woman be in danger of losing a profound love, and you shall witness a startling exhibition of willpower from an unexpected source. Let a woman's child be threatened with danger, and she will manifest a degree of courage and will that sweeps all before it. Yet, that same woman will quail before a domineering husband and lack the will to perform a simple task. A boy will perform all manner of labor if he but considers it play, and yet he can scarcely compel himself to chop a small quantity of firewood. Strong will succeeds strong desire. If you truly desire to execute a task with intensity, you can typically develop the willpower to accomplish it. The difficulty is that you have not truly desired to perform these actions, yet you attribute the failure to your will. You assert that you desire to do it, but if you pause to reflect, you will perceive that you truly desire to do something else more than the matter in question. You are unwilling to remit the price of attainment. Pause for a moment to analyze this statement and apply it to your own circumstance. You are mentally lethargic. That is the crux of the matter. Do not speak to me of lacking sufficient will. You possess a vast storehouse of will awaiting your utilization, yet you are too indolent to employ it. Now, if you are truly sincere regarding this matter, commence labor. First ascertain what you truly desire to achieve, then proceed to execute it. Disregard concerns regarding willpower. You shall discover an ample supply thereof whenever you require it. The objective is to arrive at the point where you resolve to act. That is the true test, the resolving. Contemplate these matters briefly, and determine whether or not you truly desire to be a willer sufficiently to commence work. Many excellent essays and volumes have been composed on this subject, all of which concur regarding the grandeur of willpower, employing the most enthusiastic terminology. Yet few offer instruction on how this power may be acquired by those who lack it, or who possess it to but a limited degree. Some have provided exercises designed to fortify the will, which in reality strengthen the mind such that it is capable of drawing upon its reservoir of power. However, they have generally overlooked the fact that within autosuggestion lies the secret of the development of the mind, enabling it to become the efficient instrument of the will. Autosuggestion. I am using my willpower. Articulate these words several times earnestly and positively, immediately upon concluding this article. Subsequently, repeat them frequently throughout the day, at least once per hour, and particularly when you encounter a circumstance that demands the exercise of willpower. Furthermore, repeat them several times after you retire and compose yourself for sleep. Now, there is no efficacy in the words unless you reinforce them with thought. Do you want access to this and all the complete audiobooks on the channel, plus the ebook version? Click the link in the description or scan the QR code in the left corner of the screen to access our library, where you can listen to your favorite esoteric books without ad interruptions, lock your screen, or use other apps while the narration plays, and even download the ebook version to follow along as you listen. Listen on your computer via web browser, or download the app from the Play Store. After subscribing, you will receive an email with your login details, password, and step-by-step instructions on how to access the books through the Hotmart app.